Under a clear night sky, a crowd of enthusiastic followers kept chanting the name of their leader, Ash. As they worshipped the young man sitting silently on his throne, they didn't realize that despite his serious and composed look, he was actually panicking inside. Just hours before, he had been a man pulling an all-nighter at his mobile game company. Trying to stay calm, he quickly wondered where he was. The people weren't speaking his language, but somehow he could understand every word. After thinking over the crazy situation, the young man realized he had been transported to this new world, a process known as transmigration. He felt his new body and was amazed by how naturally he could move it, as if it were a perfect fit. He also noticed his new identity shared his own first name, and he briefly considered if that's what caused his journey. However, there was a big problem. He had none of the original Ash's memories. From what he could see, he was supposed to be a sacred person whom everyone deeply respected. He knew he couldn't mess up, and he felt extremely nervous because he had no idea what his next move should be. He then glanced at the group, who seemed to be waiting for him to speak. He figured they would never believe him if he tried to explain he was also a victim, and they would probably punish him severely. Just then, his followers restarted their chant, calling out to the great Ash. Different colored lights gathered around him as his group continued to call upon his holy name, the one who would save their world. Suddenly, he knelt down and felt blessings pouring into him from various divine beings. The overwhelming energy he was receiving began to surge through him. He then thought that being transported to another world as a hero wasn't bad at all. To him, this was now a wonderful gift, since he had become a hero chosen by 4 different gods and was adored by countless followers. He imagined he would soon save the world from dangerous monsters and marry a beautiful princess. His pleasant thoughts were cut short when his loyal supporters urgently warned him that the Mad Hunters had found their hidden spot, and now everything depended on him for their survival. He couldn't help but smile upon hearing their enemy's name. Clearly, they were the bad guys, just as their name implied. He quickly drew his sword and told his followers to lead the way so he could finish off his foes. Suddenly, a group of powerful, beautiful knights attacked the area, challenging Ash to a fight. Ash felt the great power surging within him. Gifted by the gods' blessings, he tried out the various new abilities and moves he'd gained, thinking of names for them, but deciding against it to keep his strength a secret. He swung his sword and was astonished to see a powerful aura that could slice space itself. But the hunters fought back with much greater force, leaving most of Ash's followers severely wounded. Ash was utterly shocked when the hunters' attack sent him flying. He realized he was nothing compared to his enemies, even with the 4 gods' blessings. Stunned by the sudden loss, Ash understood how carelessly he had acted. He was just a regular guy from another world who knew nothing about this one. He briefly forgot he used to be just a worker who had been beaten down by society and had rushed into a reckless fight. The hunter introduced himself as Gerald, a member of the crime-fighting agency. He listed Ash's many crimes: kidnapping, murder, robbery, and leading the 4 Pillars cult case. Gerald then mocked him, saying that if he had any complaints, he could go to the Keyman branch office and submit a formal complaint to the mayor. The hunter looked down at him with a grin, telling Ash he shouldn't have fought a tri-wing hunter like him, who was no match for his 4 double-winged chaos spirits. Gerald then placed handcuffs on Ash, officially declaring his arrest as the leader of the 4 Pillars cult. That day, Gerald made a significant contribution to city safety because Ash was finally locked up. Later, at the Crime Hunting Bureau, a staff member was questioning Ash. He answered simple questions like his name and gender, but claimed to have lost most of his memories, meaning he couldn't answer anything else. Another hunter, named Amy, was furious, thinking Ash was playing dumb to avoid their questions. A third hunter spoke up, boasting he had a level 1 interrogation license and could make Ash confess easily. However, Gerald immediately cut in, telling the boastful hunter to give up and discard his license. Gerald reminded them that they must treat Ash carefully, strictly following the Human Rights Act, especially since Parliament was closely observing their actions. Frantically, Amy demanded they call a memory mage to take their captives' memories. Gerald revealed that no memory mage would come, even though memory evidence was vital for their case. He explained that Ash had experienced the 4 Pillars, which meant his memories could not be safely extracted. He pointed out that memory corruption was the cult's specialty. Gerald recalled a tragic incident 134 years ago, where a memory mage extracted a cultist's memories and unknowingly converted into a follower, which allowed the cult to grow and rise again. Furious, Amy asked how they could proceed without any confessions or memory evidence. Gerald calmed her, assuring her there was a special, slow death sentence waiting for criminals like Ash. He stressed that their interrogation was merely for show, reminding her of the upcoming public trial on the 15th at 8 p.m., where the entire city would serve as the jury. Frustrated, Amy stormed out, declaring she was done watching. Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Ash was regularly given 15-minute breaks, all thanks to the Human Rights Act. Gerald quietly watched Ash, sensing he was truly an amnesiac. Based on his fear, confusion, and panic, Gerald felt the man wasn't lying. He realized the Human Rights Act states that if someone genuinely suffers from memory loss, they can be cleared of criminal charges. If a memory test proved Ash had lost his memory, he could be released as innocent. But since using a memory mage was impossible, a public judgment was the only choice left. Ash internally lamented his luck. He wondered what life would have been like if he'd become a hero instead of the leader of an evil cult, only to be caught by a group of heroes the moment he arrived. It was terrible timing that he transmigrated just as the hunters were closing in on his cult. He remembered the shocking evidence shown during the interrogation. It almost made him sick, proving the cult leader's body he now occupied truly belonged to a dangerous criminal. He wondered how he would be executed, but was thankful for the good treatment he was receiving and hoped the death penalty was gone. Suddenly, his neck felt warm, and a system message popped up, inviting him as a special guest to the Blood Moon Judgment. Confused, he tried to type a reply, but the system informed him that messaging was locked due to his arrest and interrogation status. He figured out he could control the messaging interface using his mind, noticing it looked just like a smartphone. However, all features were locked, and no apps were usable. Just as he was about to close it, he found one functioning app, Aurora's Sorcerer Manual. He was stunned by the name. It was the exact mobile game his company had developed back in his original world. He remembered running the planning and operations team, downloading the demo to work all night, and then suddenly transmigrating. Seeing this as a possible advantage, he moved the app to his home screen, thinking of it as his powerful cheat. He launched the app, which was immediately flooded with warning signs. Since there was no network connection, he nearly gave up, but then received one final message. The search system was still working normally. Ash checked the phone-like system and found that only the gacha and top-up features were working. He clicked the active buttons, which led him to a screen for buying in-game currency. Since he had no real money, the game was useless. He tried again, but it still demanded payment, making him remember that his old company created the game. Just as he was about to give up, the check-in system suddenly fixed itself. He successfully checked in and received one source crystal, which is used for a 10 times operator search and guarantees at least one new character. Desperate to escape the blood judgment, he used the crystal. He shut his eyes tight, hoping for an extremely powerful character. When he looked and saw the skills for the character, the Berserker Sword Maiden, Ash groaned in frustration. Even this starting character required slow, long training before she would be useful. He checked another character and was shocked to see that the operator flashing before him was a version of himself. He realized the game somehow referenced him, and better yet, he could share experience points with other operators. With this information, he quickly figured out that if he could train the Berserker Sword Maiden within the game, he would get stronger as she did. This was his chance to get out of prison. He checked his inventory and found exactly the right items to train his new operator. He also discovered that the character's mood affected how much she learned during training. The better her mood, the stronger she would become. Despite facing execution, he knew he had to keep the girl happy and balanced. After making the necessary mood improvements, he registered the Berserker Sword Maiden into the Sorcerer Manual. He confirmed the action, and the character's in-game training began. Ash tried to wait patiently, but the exhaustion from the day finally took over, and he fell asleep. Meanwhile, in a different place, 3 hours behind Ash's time, a young girl named Sonia, who had gone to bed early for her skincare routine, suddenly found herself inside a strange dream. She was standing in front of a man with a sword stabbed through his chest. She drank some water from a nearby lake, noticed it was sweet, and confirmed she must be dreaming. Curious about the corpse, she wondered who he was. She grabbed the sword stuck in the man's chest, noting how perfectly the weapon fit her hand, as if it was custom-made. Suddenly, the corpse moved and slowly rose. This freaked out Sonia. The man introduced himself as the final observer, assuring her he wasn't an enemy and she shouldn't panic. However, after a moment, an evil smile spread across his face, and he declared he was going to kill her. He told her she only had the next 72 hours to defeat him if she ever wanted to leave the dream. Threatened, Sonia prepared for a fight as the final observer drew his sword and attacked her swiftly, then declared she had 10 seconds to rest. Sonia was shocked. She felt the pain, but there was no visible wound. Seeing her confusion, the final observer explained they were in a shared dream and that her 10 seconds were over. He slashed her again and gave her another 10 seconds of rest. With her sword still out of reach, she decided to escape by diving into the lake, believing he couldn't follow. Holding her breath, She swam away from her enemy, who mocked her attempt as shameful and pointless. She started struggling to breathe and briefly surfaced for air. But the observer managed to slice her anyway by throwing his sword and striking her even underwater. She touched her face to make sure her jaw was still there, while the observer laughed, mocking her for not learning her lesson after dying so many times by his hand. Seeing his smug look, Sonia started to get angry, but then, to the observer's surprise, she knelt and begged him to spare her. With tears in her eyes, she promised to obey him if he would just stop the torture. The observer simply sneered, telling her he would only be satisfied if she managed to defeat him. This really triggered her. Sonia marched toward him and angrily demanded to know why he was so obsessed with killing her when she had done nothing wrong to him. Sonia tried to argue, insisting the final observer should seek revenge against truly wicked people instead of attacking a fragile girl like her. The observer simply told her she had wronged him before and attacked again. During a brief pause, Sonia asked if staying in the dream for the full 72 hours would guarantee her escape. The observer confirmed she would eventually leave, but only by dying repeatedly, suggesting 72 hours felt like forever when constantly killed. He questioned why she would believe anything he said since he kept trying to murder her. Furthermore, surviving one night offered no promise of surviving the next. He picked up his sword, warning her not to hope for miracles after experiencing death so many times. The observer quickly swung his sword, but in a surprising moment, Sonia managed to block the attack with her own sword. Despite this small win, she continued to be defeated repeatedly. For the next round, she focused on thinking about the world's greatest sword masters, whose skills were so intense that even their simple moves caused fear. She reasoned that the observer was not one of those masters, meaning she still had a chance. She smiled when she saw the magical wound she had inflicted on the observer heal itself, realizing the dream offered her no easy ways out. She started the next battle by charging in. Just as she expected, the observer used his typical opening move, and she successfully blocked it. They exchanged several quick slashes while Sonia counted to 5. At 5, she delivered a powerful slice that the observer barely dodged. Her aggressive stance left her wide open for a counterattack. Sonia, however, was ready. She smiled, sidestepped the attack, and saw a clear chance to strike the observer while he was mid-swing. She declared that after dying so many times, she had learned his every move. Her strike was so strong it slammed the observer against a wall. The massive gash on the observer instantly vanished. Sonia asked if hitting him counted as a victory. The observer said yes and congratulated her. She sighed in relief, but the moment was fleeting. He then told her she now had to defeat him while he used 2 swords. He grabbed a second sword, adopted a 2-sword stance, and announced this was just the beginning of the second half, warning her there would be no more 10-minute breaks. Just then, Sonia heard her name being called and woke up, looking completely drained. Her roommate, Ingrid, told her it was 7 a.m. and she needed to get ready for their general education class. Sonia mentioned she had a terrible nightmare, but Ingrid didn't think much of it and left. Sonia completed her routine and went to the lecture hall, joining the many students facing the professor. As she wrote notes, she thought about the observer and whether her trial was truly just a dream. She remembered his final warning after she defeated him, that her life was only just beginning. Sonia promised herself she would not let the observer control her life. Meanwhile, Ash woke up in his high-end prison suite within Camion City's Shattered Lake prison. He was confused, feeling utterly exhausted despite getting a full night's sleep. He checked the system screen, where a notification from the Sorcerer manual game informed him that his bond with the Berserker Sword Maiden had improved. He was happy that simple training activities strengthened their connection. He was pleased he had pre-planned her training and decided his Sword Maiden needed to keep working hard. At the same moment, Sonia felt a deep ache in her chest, but she stood up with a cheerful smile to correctly answer a difficult question from the professor. The other students were impressed by her intelligence and beauty. Sonia then took a moment to introduce herself to the reader, mentioning her humble start in a small village before earning her place at Swordflower University through a basic education course. Sonia proudly stated that she was the first person from her tiny hometown to be accepted into the university in 2 decades. When she first walked onto the campus, others whispered about her simple, country bumpkin looks. Within a month, she mastered applying makeup, choosing stylish clothes, and perfected a sophisticated city accent. She successfully transformed into the brilliant and popular student she is now. Her good looks helped her land several part-time jobs, making her a well-known figure. She joined many school activities and hosted events, becoming a minor campus celebrity. As she walked around, she recalled how innocent and green she looked when she first arrived. She left the campus gates to meet someone and found her mother, who called her Linda. Sonia quickly corrected her, reminding her to use her new name. Excited, the daughter wanted to show her mother the city and took her on a train ride. During the trip, Sonia pointed out the same sights she saw when she first arrived: the spotless streets, the massive skyscrapers, and the expensive cars. She remembered being overwhelmed by the sight of well-dressed people and the huge digital billboards that played ads all day. Now she happily watched her mother enjoying the view. Sonia reflected on how her mother raised her alone after her alcoholic, abusive father died. Her mother took on all the farm's hard labor so Sonia could focus completely on studying. Sonia felt lucky, knowing that other kids like her were forced to work in factories and never left their small town. Determined to make her mother's visit special, she was intent on making sure she enjoyed every moment. Sonia took her to a popular food truck and then to a clothing store where she offered to buy her a new dress. She also showed her a fancy restaurant, but her mother didn't want to eat there. Later, they sat together on a park bench, eating snacks beside a fountain. It was soon time for Sonia to take her mother to the train station for the ride back home. Before her mother boarded, Sonia begged her to stay one more night. Her mother kindly refused, saying the city made her uncomfortable. Sonia promised to bring her back someday and give her a life of luxury. Her mother held her hand, saying she believed in her and that she could achieve it. She advised her daughter to always remember that no matter what happened, she could always return home for a warm meal. She then said the city seemed too complicated and that maybe it would be better for Sonia to come home for a quiet life. Before getting on the train, she gave her daughter a bag of money, assuring her she didn't spend anything back home anyway. As she boarded, the mother promised her daughter that everything was fine. Sonia checked the bag and found candy tucked in with the cash. Just as she put the money into her side bag, a man came up behind her. He quickly pulled out a tiny razor blade to slice a hole in the bag. Sonia instantly chopped the man's hand, forcing him to drop the razor. Without even looking at him, she walked out of the station. She stopped in the middle of the busy street to admire the city lights and the constant rush. She decided that this complex city life was where she truly belonged. It was late, and Sonia was trying to persuade the university guard to let her in after curfew. After trying to gain his sympathy, she was finally allowed to enter. As she walked across campus, she smiled, knowing her beauty was the weapon that got her past the guard. She reflected that beauty was power in this world and believed hers was the main reason she had been able to reach high society. Walking up to her dorm room, she silently thanked her mother for the genetics that helped her fit in. Near her door, she overheard one of her roommates complaining about how late Sonia was and guessing she was probably flirting with some wealthy man. Sonia pressed her ear against the door to better hear her hateful roommate, who continued to speak badly about her. The girl inside then mentioned seeing Sonia with her mother outside, suggesting the mother must be ashamed of her. Sonia's anger flared, and she reached for the doorknob to confront them. Just as she was about to turn it, a loud, heavy clang sound suddenly silenced the conversation inside. Ingrid opened the door, gave Sonia a quick "good evening," and left the room. Sonia looked inside and noticed a fresh dent in the punching bag by the door. She realized Ingrid had punched it to silence the gossip. The only people remaining were her roommate, Lois, and Lois's little pet dog, Adele. Sonia explained to herself that Lois, the daughter of a local merchant, constantly tried to insult Sonia's humble origins with passive-aggressive comments. Sonia recalled how she always got more attention from men than Lois, no matter how hard Lois tried to act like the prettier girl. Lois's hatred intensified after Sonia landed the host role for a major event. Following that, Lois constantly threw parties for the water magic students and took classmates to expensive restaurants, always making sure to leave Sonia out. These social moves eventually led more boys to pursue Lois. When Lois started to like a certain senior who then began chasing her, Sonia deliberately bumped into him. This made the senior shift his focus and pursue Sonia instead. Sonia ultimately rejected him, knowing that Lois's pride would never allow her to go after a guy even a country bumpkin wouldn't date. In her mind, Sonia had actually helped Lois avoid a boring man. Sonia dreamed of finding a wealthy man to quickly elevate her into high society. To achieve this, she intended to become a water sorceress. Her research showed that water sorcerers were the most likely to marry into nobility. She planned to use Swordflower University's reputation for creating elite sword, wind, and water sorcerers to graduate as a top water sorcerer. She envisioned herself meeting a nobleman who would introduce her to his mother. She had already decided against being a sword sorcerer, believing a muscular body was bad for a woman seeking a high society marriage. She hoped to summon her first water spirit by next year and fully awaken her silver wings before graduation to become a winged sorcerer. Her ultimate plan was to sneak into a campus event at Truth University to find and trap a young nobleman. She noted that Truth University was the premier school in Galaxis, where everyone was rich and powerful, making it the perfect place to find a partner. As she studied from a book and removed her makeup, she thought about how much effort and money her appearance required. She firmly believed she would land a high society husband and elevate her mother to a noble woman's life. Suddenly, a voice startled her, telling her to focus on sword practice. She spun around and saw the observer standing there. He urged her to communicate with him using only her thoughts. Sonia glanced around and saw that Lois and Adele clearly could not see the man, even though he was right next to them. The observer again told Sonia he was not her enemy. He then showed her a bottle containing a green fluid and told her to drink it. Sonia refused, stating there was no way she would drink it. The observer poured the liquid onto the floor, but instead of spilling, it magically flowed directly down Sonia's throat. The drink immediately forced her body to stand up. The observer showed her a wooden sword and commanded her to practice. With determined eyes, Sonia mentally refused repeatedly. However, her body suddenly got dressed on its own. She grabbed the wooden sword and walked out of the room. As she walked down the hall, she could hear Lois complaining loudly that Sonia was probably trying to hit on some sword sorcery senior. Sonia eventually found herself at the sword training hall, where many students, including Ingrid, were sweating as they practiced on armored dummies. Ingrid was proud of her own progress, believing she could hit the 10th target ring by the next month and summon a sword spirit. She checked her ego, reminding herself to keep training hard. Sonia's entrance caused every sword practitioner to turn and look at her, wondering why she was in the training area. Sonia walked up to a dummy and began striking it with her wooden sword. Ingrid observed that Sonia's technique was sluggish and clumsy. Ingrid thought about what it took to be a female sword sorcerer: calloused hands and a muscular body. She wondered if Sonia was truly ready for that commitment. Then, she suspected Sonia was training to get a boyfriend, realizing her target must be Felix, the sword magic student who was watching her right now. Ingrid knew Felix was the son of the Voslata family, a powerful noble house and key member of the Stellaris Council. His father, Duke Voslata, controlled the most advanced steel factories in Stellaris, making him one of the country's most important figures. Ingrid was concerned that Sonia was chasing a known womanizer, but she was still happy to gain a new friend who loved the sword. She continued watching Sonia practice on the magic dummy and realized that Sonia had already hit the edge of the first ring on the target after only a few minutes. Observing closely, Ingrid noted that while Sonia's movements were still rough and exhausting, she was perfectly following the sword magic manual. She worried that Sonia would collapse from exhaustion within minutes. Ingrid started counting Sonia's strikes to help her keep track. After hundreds, Ingrid lost count and was completely focused on her friend's practice. Soon, the entire training hall was watching Sonia in awe. The crowd estimated that she had been training for 90 minutes straight and had already performed over 2,400 hits. Felix's girlfriend, Cecilia, walked in, assuming everyone was gathered around her boyfriend because he was doing something impressive. She was shocked to see Felix staring intently at Sonia. She could tell he was totally captivated. Cecilia looked at Sonia and immediately assumed she had put on makeup just to attract guys. Worried that Sonia was using this sword act to target Felix, Cecilia planned to quickly drag her boyfriend away. Cecilia asked why everyone was staring at Sonia. Felix explained that Sonia, a complete beginner with no proper stance, had arrived an hour and a half ago and was now able to cut through 9 rings of a target with a single strike. Cecilia asked if Sonia was just pretending to be a beginner. Felix admitted he'd thought the same thing and had watched her to see when she would fail, but after 90 minutes, his initial doubt had turned into pure respect. Feeling threatened that a girl could capture Felix's attention so easily, Cecilia realized that training for an hour and a half straight was impossible. She noted that even Felix could only manage 3 hours, and that was with breaks. Cecilia let go of Felix's arm, believing she had just completely lost the battle for his interest to Sonia. Finally, Sonia hit the 10th ring on the target. Everyone was thrilled, watching on the edge of their seats. When she hit the 10th ring, her practice dummy shattered. The whole crowd erupted in cheers. Sonia finally rested. She realized she was now much closer to summoning a sword spirit and becoming a winged sorcerer. She couldn't believe her dream of an easy life was so close. Ingrid brought her some water. Suddenly, Sonia felt a liquid stream down her throat. She looked up and saw Felix, and behind him, she saw the observer. Just like before, he had poured a bottle of fluid onto the floor. The observer told her she couldn't rest yet and needed to defeat Felix immediately. He happily explained that he simply wanted to set up a fight between her and the strongest person in the room. He added that he loved it when nobles were badly beaten, so he was delighted that the strongest person happened to be one. Sonia urgently asked to fight someone else, explaining that she did not want to get involved with Felix. She knew Felix was a playboy at Swordflower University, always driving a luxurious car and changing girlfriends every 3 days. In her personal notes, she had written that Felix enjoyed collecting women. She also found it suspicious that the son of Duke Voslada ended up at Swordflower University instead of the elite Truth University, suggesting he was likely involved in some kind of political scandal. Sonia told the Observer she thought Felix was a villain. Unfortunately for her, the Observer thought this was an ideal match, advising her to smash the sword prodigy and kick the Stellarist noble to the curb. Despite Sonia internally insisting she would never do that, her body suddenly pointed the wooden sword at Felix and challenged him to a duel. The entire crowd went wild. Cecilia was furious, convinced Sonia was using this to force a connection with Felix. Meanwhile, Sonia kept repeating in her mind that she wouldn't fight, but her body held the challenging pose. Ingrid tried to intervene, reminding Sonia she was tired after 2 hours of training, suggesting they fight tomorrow instead. Felix, however, insisted they fight immediately. He explained that Sonia was the most talented person he had ever seen, and only the second person to genuinely make him feel afraid. He believed if he waited until the next day, he wouldn't have the courage to face her. Felix drew his own sword and pointed it at Sonia, declaring he would win tonight no matter what. Everyone recognized the wave sword fighting stance he used. Sonia remembered that the Voslada family was famous for 4 secret sword stances that could summon spirits, and the wave stance was one of them. Sonia assumed a basic sword stance, ready to fight. She complained to the Observer that there was no point in winning if he was just controlling her body. She tried to bargain, asking for control back so she could find an easier opponent. The Observer then revealed something shocking. He had never been controlling her body. He explained that she had trained on her own because after defeating him in the dream last night, she realized her immense talent for the sword. He analyzed that she came to the training hall to push her own limits so that Ingrid and the others could see she had a talent to be proud of, one that wasn't just her looks. Sonia charged at Felix. As they traded blows, the Observer reminded Sonia that she had challenged the boy because she hated him for being the center of attention at the school. Felix could tell from her moves that Sonia was strong, but he confidently continued his offense, certain her moves were no match for his wave sword style. His repeated strikes forced Sonia to step back. As this happened, the Observer continued to goad her, saying that despite her talent, Felix was unbeatable because of his wave stance. He emphasized that there were people born with everything who would always surpass her. This motivated her to keep up with Felix's movements, making him wonder where she found the stamina. Felix decided to end the fight and began charging energy in his body. As a bright light filled the room, the Observer kept pushing Sonia, reminding her that she had grabbed the wooden sword, gone to the training hall, and challenged the strongest person all by herself, just to prove she was just as good as anyone. Suddenly, to everyone's amazement, Sonia copied Felix's wave stance. The crowd was stunned that she had mastered the stance just by seeing it once. Cecilia thought Sonia was trying to humiliate Felix and then purposely lose, just to guarantee a future duel and get closer to him. Both opponents rushed at each other for a final strike. A loud crash echoed through the hall. A piece of Sonia's broken wooden sword landed on the floor. The crowd looked at Felix's left shoulder and saw a wave sword spirit appear. Everyone was impressed that he was able to summon his life-bound spirit during the battle. Ingrid cheered for Sonia, telling her she would summon her own spirit soon. Sonia insisted that she had not lost, but the crowd thought she was just being stubborn. Suddenly, the tip of Felix's wooden sword also broke off. At the same moment, a wave sword spirit appeared on Sonia's right shoulder. The crowd was speechless. She had learned Felix's wave stance mid-battle and summoned a spirit immediately afterward. The people who had spent years trying to master the sword felt discouraged, realizing they were looking at a true genius. Sonia looked into the crowd and saw the Observer watching her. She asked if he was merely a reflection of her internal thoughts, a hallucination. The Observer simply picked up the broken piece of the wooden sword from the floor and magically reattached it to Sonia's sword. As the Observer slowly vanished, he gave Sonia one last taunt, telling her to guess what he really was. This made Sonia furious, and she started yelling curses at him. Meanwhile, Ash saw a notification on his system screen that his Berserker Sword Maiden had leveled up many times and gained several new powers, including the Wave Stance and the Wave Sword Spirit. He also noticed a title called One-Wing Sword Sorcerer and assumed the number of wings meant more superpowers. Seeing how much his Sword Maiden had grown made Ash feel that getting up at 6 a.m. to check her progress was worth it. Despite her gains, Ash didn't feel any stronger himself. He felt tricked by the game, guessing it might be because he hadn't spent any money yet. His old company's games were famous for being unplayable without paying. The prison's automated voice then announced that Ash was allowed to move freely in certain areas. His door unlocked, and the computer invited him to the cafeteria. Ash pulled up the Shattered Lake Prison Inmate Manual on his screen to understand what was happening. The manual described prison luxury so unbelievable that he felt like it was all a joke. Everything seemed too convenient, making him deeply suspicious. He slowly stepped out into the hall. The complete lack of guards made the silence even more unnerving. He ran to the end of the hall and found an indoor park where several inmates were relaxing. He spotted a prison guard sitting on a couch and felt relieved, thinking he could call for help if needed. He believed he needed protection since he hadn't gained any of his Sword Maiden's experience yet. Feeling safer, he walked around looking for the cafeteria. He saw inmates watching a politician's press conference on a huge screen and even noticed orc and goblin prisoners discussing complex politics. An inmate approached Ash and greeted him, saying he recognized him as the leader of the Four Pillars cult. The inmate introduced himself as Igor, explaining that Ash's face was constantly on the news. Igor offered his hand for a handshake and invited Ash to join his escape plan. Ash accepted the offer wholeheartedly, without a moment of thought. Just as they were about to shake hands, a woman's voice told Ash that if she were him, she would punch Igor in the face instead. Ash looked at the woman and was stunned. She looked and sounded exactly like his Sword Maiden. He listened to her and got ready to punch Igor. As Ash leaped to punch Igor, a chip embedded in his neck flashed, warning him that harming a citizen was forbidden. A red alarm blared in his head, repeating the warning. His fist froze just inches from Igor's face. He couldn't move at all. Igor laughed at the failed punch. Since Ash seemed satisfied with prison life, Igor turned and walked away, and Ash was suddenly able to move again. The Sword Maiden, scoffing at him, asked why he was so surprised. She explained that the chip detected his intention to harm and disabled his attack. She noted that the technology was actually quite useful and practical for keeping people in line. She explained that while combat and magic were restricted there, inmates used tricks, like using a spirit to form a contract. This is what Igor did. By shaking his hand and accepting his invitation to be friends, the victim would become his slave, like a succubus securing subservience. It was far worse than the labor contracts in his old world. Moving on, Ash wondered if the other people could see her. He realized he could talk to her freely, but to everyone else, he looked like a madman talking to himself. Not caring, he continued their conversation and confirmed she was the actual Sword Maiden. She admitted she had doubted his identity as the observer if she hadn't seen him first. They started to argue about how they didn't look like their official character art, though she conceded it was normal to change clothes sometimes. Ash misunderstood the situation and immediately asked her to help him escape, but was confused when she flatly refused. The Sword Maiden questioned why she would release him, arguing the prison was a perfect fit for useless trash like him. In fact, she suggested he could retire early and live the easy life he'd always wanted right there. The young man argued that he had been framed and was forced to face some moon judgment. As she laughed at him, he whined and started to label himself as her superior, but his words were cut short as she glared at him and questioned exactly what he was to her, daring him to complete his sentence. She poked his forehead several times in an instant, hard enough that he was forced onto the couch. Putting her face close to his, she stared down at him and asked if he was about to call himself her master. No longer smiling, he wondered if that was so wrong of him to do. She was just a virtual character, and without him, the player, she would cease to exist. The way he put things made her expression even darker, and he had no choice but to grit his teeth and accept it. Now raising his voice, Ash said he was not her master, but insisted he was not her servant either. If she could not treat him as an equal, she might as well go back into her game as Data. The Sword Maiden stared at him for a while, and her sharp frown turned into a knowing smirk. She turned away, confirming that she was just a virtual character born from his thoughts. However, he must remember what he said about him never becoming her master. The young man was told to swear and would be cursed to lose his face for a decade if he lied. Without any hesitation, he did as told and promised. With a satisfied smile, she called on him to talk while walking. Instead of escaping, they would have breakfast since he was so hungry. That said, she could not really help him even if she wanted to. Invisible, untouchable, and unable to affect the physical world, how could she help him escape? The reason she was there right now was because of their bond as Sword Maiden and Observer. It was finally time to transfer the experience points she got from being forced to train so much. Delighted, he opened his arms to accept it all. She scolded him again for foolishly thinking it was so easy to gain what she had worked for. Wondering how he was supposed to get the experience, Ash was told to fight people and let the experience naturally transmit into his body. Eagerly looking around, he found a target. A costumed man named Lang who was heavily tattooed, scarred, and generally looked like he had killed hundreds. Basically begging for trouble, the young prisoner knocked the man's glass of milk over, spilling it all over his head, and apologized uncaringly. Even though he started it, the man's demonic aura made Ash tremble in fear. But to his surprise, the rugged man sweetly told him to be careful and try the cafeteria's milk. Slack-jawed in shock, Ash did as told and got his lunch tray. Sitting at a table with his meal, he heard a loud, insulting laugh. The Sword Maiden was cackling, unable to help her reaction to the ridiculous situation caused by the chips in their necks. Any form of aggression was prohibited, even intentional ones. Any effort to disobey or remove the chip would result in a heart-stopping shock sent to their body. He would have to find a way to engage in battle without relying on her like his mother. Playing along, he acted like a toddler asking her for milk, but the death-seeking action sent him flying backward. He lightly bumped into Lang from earlier, and this encounter gave him the chance to get acquainted and ask around directly. Misunderstanding Ash's friendliness, the muscular man said he already had a boyfriend. Ash tried to clarify, but the confusion only grew. While he was surely a nice person, the prisoner was loyal to his partner and could not cheat. Moving on, they got to Ash's actual question, although they still hadn't gotten past the flirting error. Ash had no choice but to cut him off and ask about ways to fight in the prison. Lang's expression changed, and he said Ash had come to the right person if he wanted to use his muscles. He was a member of the Deathmatch Society, which had permission to temporarily lift the chip's restrictions. Surprised, Ash wondered if the warden really allowed them to fight to the death. Someone might die, but that would not make the fighter a murderer. Next to the arena was the medical room where people could be brought back if saved within 5 minutes. Even if someone actually died, the prison did not care. In the middle of his explanation, Lang suddenly recognized Ash as the leader of the Pillars cult. He got sidetracked again, sharing that he was quite interested in the cult. Back to the topic, Lang said it was understandable that Ash was eager to join the society since the 15th was so close. Since the newbie looked completely clueless, the veteran explained the significance of the date. Everyone in the prison was on death row, and they were given a great life inside because the only thing waiting for them was absolute death. Ash already expected it, but having it confirmed made his body freeze. The Moon Judgment was a televised show held on the 1st and 15th of every month, generating massive broadcast revenue. In other words, watching executions was highly popular in this world. He fell to his knees in disbelief, but brightened up when he was told there was a way to escape the event. All prisoners started with 50 points, which dropped by 10 each month. If one hit 0, they were not immediately punished, but the lower the point count, the closer they were to participating in the judgment. This count essentially determined their participation. There were many ways to earn points, and the easiest was to create value. Based on their own skills, prisoners could offer something to the prison. However, most prisoners were just killers with no special talent to leverage. The deathmatch worked on a system where contestants bet points and the winner took all. Before going on stage, most fighters had to wear some kind of makeup. As he said this, Lang licked his milk glass and confirmed that Ash still wanted to join the society after everything he heard. With that, Lang led Ash to the arena to see the space. The first match of the day required a bet of 1 point, and this number increased with each subsequent match. It was a slow crawl at first, but the stakes quickly added up. Because of that, people used the earlier fights to size up others and understand their weaknesses. With the judgment coming soon, the place was sure to be busy. While walking in the dark, Lang asked Ash if he wanted to buy some meat. Meat often fell off the arena, and it was one way to spend their contribution points. Giving a devious smile, they entered the hall, where Lang was greeted and addressed as the gourmet. Noticing Ash with him, the inmates joked, asking if he was the new boyfriend. But the jab at his relationship made Lang threaten them with punishment. It worked, and the troublesome people backed off, allowing Ash to be formally introduced. Ash realized he had randomly messed with someone who must be notorious here. There was an ongoing fight between Tiger and Rudder. In the middle of the arena, an old man was weathering the attacks of a large orc. The orc hadn't fought in a while and made the mistake of picking the old man. Since Tiger bet higher, there was no option but to end the match sooner or later. Rudder's tired body was punched around, even causing him to lose a tusk. The human winner raised his arms and unleashed a deadly barrage of punches at his opponent's face. Although the winner was obvious, the match would not end yet. The air barrier had not been lifted, meaning the fight continued. It would only stop when one died or was rendered completely unconscious. In an arena without surrender, one had to keep overwhelming and crushing their opponent. Countless fools had overestimated their skills and died to an opponent hungry for points. After all, the point of the deathmatch was to transfer points to someone more deserving. Speaking of points, Ash noticed that the bets of the current fighters were not equal. This was normal, as the rules stated prisoners had to bet slightly more than they did in their previous match. Tiger had fought 34 times before, which was why he bet 35 now. On the other hand, Rudder had fought 10 times but only had 5 points left to his name. Unfortunately, he always went up against opponents he could not beat. As they were speaking, the barrier was removed and the orc's body fell over. With the match over, the medical staff immediately came out and dragged the body to the infirmary for treatment. Tiger walked back, faking weakness after obviously hustling his opponent. Even the Sword Maiden had to acknowledge the old man's strength, asking why he was so powerful. Others explained that mana was still restricted in the arena, but physical attacks were allowed. Most sorcerers in their world were not much different from normal people if their mana was sealed. However, a select few were called body sorcerers who refined their physical body and technique. Taking it a step further, there was a type that altered their body to a point where the enhancements did not fade. Tiger was an example of this type, and he was known as a masochist sorcerer. Ash was told to get into the arena already since he was there anyway. The Sword Maiden told him to pick someone who fights with fists and advised him to do the same, since he was probably too weak to hold a weapon for long. Obediently, he turned and asked if he could find a bare-handed opponent. The mysterious figure was delighted, as Ash was exactly the type of person he was searching for. Ash honestly admitted he was only betting 1 point, so his opponent would not gain much from preying on him. Fortunately, the prisoner did not mind and said he would even give Ash some points of his own. Just then, Igor stepped into the light, claiming to have fists as weak as Ash's. As he got ready for the match, the audience's words made Ash realize it would not be an easy fight. Igor insisted it should be a fair fight, especially since Ash was the leader of the Four Pillars cult. Based on the cheers, it seemed this opponent was not the type to fight straightforwardly. Ash felt hopeful, remembering the Sword Maiden's advice about not agreeing to anything Igor offered. However, the Sword Maiden insultingly laughed at his empty ambition. He went on about not accepting anything, yet there he was, willingly stepping into the ring following Igor's challenge. Realizing he had foolishly agreed to a match, he trembled as he walked forward. He did not know why, but he was immediately convinced that fighting was the only option. He had fallen into the succubus trap. The thought of saying no did not even enter his head. The Sword Maiden repeated that he should not carelessly respond to anyone's invitation. He was the final observer, and as such, he should reject everything that came his way with a flat no. To him, the only way up was to seize his destiny with his own power. Like a demon lord, Ash turned away, ironically rejecting her as she had advised. Just like that, the arena barrier activated and the battle started. The chip's limiter came undone, and it felt like a shackle was removed. Igor wasted no time and dashed forward with clenched fists. The young man instinctively put his hands up to guard, but this was expected, and the veteran swept across Ash's legs. Falling on his face, Ash rolled over and tried to regain his balance, only to find his opponent right beside him. A strong punch was driven into his unguarded gut, and the impact made him vomit all over the floor. However, Igor was far from done and smiled as he told his opponent to grit his teeth. The newbie did as told, already tearing up from the pain. Another punch came, this time to the side of his head. The poor young man stumbled around, losing his balance and barely clinging to consciousness. As soon as his body pressed against the barrier, Igor continued to unleash a barrage of hits. Still guarding with his arms up, Ash questioned when the experience transfer was going to kick in. As the pain piled on, he called to the Sword Maiden, basically begging her to take over. She nonchalantly told him to fight back, as the experience transferred faster the more he got beaten. The Sword Maiden acted like she did not care but watched him with observant eyes. He looked pathetic, but he was still pushing himself to the limit and refusing to give up. In fact, she could not help but feel that even without the Sorcerer manual, he was strong at his very core. As she expected, he really was the final observer. Driven by his grit as a corporate slave, Ash set his eyes on a counterattack. He gritted his teeth and pushed his fist forward, but the soft, flimsy punch was easily dodged. Finding it cute, Igor hit his face with barely any effort. This exchange went on for a few sequences, and the crowd cheered upon seeing Igor's signature hits where the enemy naturally crashed into his fists. Tiger and Lang had to acknowledge his strength but vaguely dodged the question of who would win. At this point, Ash was beaten like a bruised fruit. Igor asked if he knew how he had won all his matches despite being physically weak. It was true that nothing about Igor was particularly special. They were both weaklings, but the difference was that people like the young man were livestock. Meanwhile, Igor was a master that skinned and butchered them. Races with stronger bodies had all fallen before him, already beaten the moment they entered the ring. Watching Ash leap forward in a desperate attempt to win, Igor already knew what the weak boy was going to do. He read Ash's movements like an open book and planned his counterattack. Every one of the boy's thoughts was streaming into his mind, clear as day. Like a lamb ready for the oven, all that was left was to devour his pathetic opponent. With a confident grin, Igor dodged again and brought his elbow down to knock him out. To his surprise, Ash dodged perfectly and managed to strike back. The veteran immediately jumped away, sensing a danger that was completely unexpected. It was an undeniably bad sign. Playing around was no longer an option, so he had to end the fight immediately. Meanwhile, the crowd was getting wild and riled up, even telling the blonde veteran to bring a weapon to cut his enemies up next time. However, Lang noted that it would not be as easy as they thought. Looking back at the arena, they noticed that Igor, who had landed every punch moments ago, was now missing more and more hits. Finally, there was a real show, and some thought Ash had been pretending to be weak all along. Tiger refuted this, saying the boy genuinely was weak just moments ago. His body had not been hardened by real combat, and Lang confirmed this, as he was the one who brought him. In just a few minutes, Ash had developed sharp combat instincts. It was a shame to see the wrong person in the wrong place, awakening the wrong talent. For the first time since the match began, the cult leader was forcing the beauty beast onto the defense. The Sword Maiden smiled, knowing the fight was over. Every era has a theme, and in this age, people no longer conquered new lands. Instead, the theme was sophisticated domination. In a world where class was decided at birth, Psyche sorcerers were the apex predators. Even ruling clans feared them, and knowledge of their power was hidden from the lower classes. Igor had, by luck, met the perfect conditions and taught himself to become a Psyche sorcerer. On top of that, he already possessed the base magic spirit contract, making his word law. As long as certain conditions were met, his ability was unstoppable. He would be a king wherever rules existed, and the prison was no exception. With this power, he had dominated everyone around him. Even after losing to him in a death match, they would accept another fight until their points ran dry. But now, the young man in front of him had changed. From a silent and docile animal waiting to be slaughtered, he had turned into a louder animal still waiting to be slaughtered. With a smile, Igor admitted he had underestimated him. Ash's learning speed gave him the potential to be more, but his sheer physical strength was trash. After this match, Igor had no intention of fighting him again, and Ash could not challenge him either. Knowing the rules and using them to dominate was what true power meant. Such was the difference between the dominator and the dominated. Not caring about his words, Ash told Igor not to block his face. Igor was caught off guard by the unexpected statement and was blankly told that his face was perfect to look at for a long time. This single thought consumed Igor's mind. Since it was the first time he had ever received such genuine praise, he unconsciously lowered his hands. A hard punch landed right on his chin. He fell flat to the floor, and just like that, the match was over. Ash was declared the winner. But with the adrenaline gone, exhaustion took over, and he also collapsed. His first taste of fighting was painful and unbearable. He finally understood the entire point of the death match, which turned prisoners into soulless sources of entertainment for the rich. They were all trapped and doomed to die either to the judgment or the death match. His rational self suddenly popped up, saying it made sense for people who had broken the law. If he wasn't there himself, he would probably be applauding the very system he was stuck in. While conversing with himself, he realized that the pain in his body was gone. Just then, a voice told him to go chase dinner time if he was awake and healed up. Ash opened his eyes, but they bulged in shock as the person before him was wearing the uniform of a plague doctor. The doctor was worried because of his reaction, but was sure that they had treated him well. After ensuring the figure really was just a healer, the boy asked for plastic surgery to make him handsome. It was just nonsensical chat, but to his surprise, the doctor excitedly offered a bunch of options for his request. Terrified by the fervent reaction, Ash declined, saying he didn't have money, but the healer insisted they wanted him, not his money. An awkward silence passed because of the confession. He played along, saying they didn't know each other that well yet. The masked person clarified that they wanted the boy's body to operate on. In fact, they were even willing to pay for the right to operate. They tried to convince him, listing how lucky he was to have someone with amazing credentials work on him for free. That said, Ash was well aware that most free things come with a hefty price later on. Finally, this made the doctor admit that their operations came with a tiny risk. It would seem harmless to a naive person, but Ash knew the dangers of such wording. As such, he asked the healer to be specific about the risks. Medicine there was developed from spirits, and they could do anything as long as a body had moisture. The most common one used in healing was hydrotherapy, but it had a lot of flaws, including errors and regrowth. Still, that spirit could evolve with practice and would become more efficient with time. The prison was the best place to evolve as a doctor, as there were inmates nearing death every day. Again, prisoners were further used as resources, this time to train healers. That said, treatment itself did not cost any contribution points, so it still wasn't exploitative to the maximum extent. Ash then scolded the healer for wearing such an ominous outfit, but it actually served as a safeguard that deterred shock patients from attacking the doctor in case of errors. While it was meant to improve patient-doctor relations, the measure indicated a high chance of operations going wrong. Getting frustrated, the young man scolded the doctor and launched painful accusations. The healer was hurt by the words, but meekly explained that it wasn't their fault. Tears ran down as they tried to explain their side. Ash asked if they were aware of their biggest flaw. It was the fact that their way of speaking wasn't strong, firm, or confident. Because of how insecure they sounded, any side effects felt by the patient would be thrown back at them. He passionately told the doctor to say things more confidently, even when they couldn't heal the person. That was only the first step. They still had to call bad patients out for not taking care of themselves. Since no one is perfect, they were sure to find a bad angle to put the patient down. As long as these two steps were done, authority could be established, and they could present their treatment as a privilege. This ideal was something based on his years of corporate experience. Moving forward, there was only one thing left to do. No matter what surgery was done, the doctor had to insist that they already did their very best. Encouraged, the doctor started screaming and repeating this idea. Ash was satisfied and certain they would pick up the rest on their own. It was a terrible technique in corporations, but it might help his healer's career. Just then, the doctor called out, asking if he really didn't want plastic surgery, and even adding that it was rude to go around with such a face. Ash wasn't sure if he was meant to feel proud, as his student was already applying his lesson. He turned away and smiled, insisting that his face likely wasn't as bad as the masked ones. Frustrated, they argued and stated that they weren't ugly, prompting curiosity over their looks. For a moment, it felt like they were going to remove their mask, but they just suddenly handed Ash a tag with the number 222. He was told to keep it on him at all times so everyone knew who his doctor was. Again, this made the young man question the doctor's identity, but they avoided the question and just repeated the instruction to bring the tag everywhere. With this, the patient was pushed away and told to get dinner before the cafeteria closed. Before completely walking away, Ash turned back and asked the healer to cut him an apple the next time he came there. Just like that, they agreed to grab a meal together soon. Actually, this was a trick meant to get close to others by asking for small and trivial favors. He used this to get extra bonuses and awards in his past life. Another doctor appeared from the curtains and asked 222 why they were still there. As the senior doctor got a gist of what happened, he questioned if his subordinate had chatted with the patient. That was strictly against the rules, as the Human Rights Association must never know about their activities. With that, 222 ran off, reminded that they would not even be there without their supervisor. It seemed the senior was establishing authority and putting 222 in their place. It was true that 222 was there because of connections, and that point could always be used as criticism. They suddenly remembered Ash, whose recovery was better than the others. Giddy with the thought, they hoped he would be beaten up again sooner. After so much struggle, Ash thought he would be in a safer place, but it seemed nothing had changed at all. He won 45 points from the match but still had to attend the judgment in a few days, regardless of his points. All prisoners were required to attend their first judgment. Honestly, the odds of surviving were not terrible, but as the leader of the Pillars cult, he was bound to be a main target during the event. Since the young man did not intend on giving up his life so easily, Lang said someone wanted to fight him and asked if he would accept the challenge. This was the real reason Lang was waiting for him in the cafeteria. The opponent was going to bet 36 points, and it was rare for such people to go against newbies. His name was Varkas, but Ash had never even heard of him before. Just then, Lang spoke another name. Silent. Ash silently cocked his head in confusion, and the veteran observed his reaction. Lang brushed it off, saying he just thought of someone he knew. Moving on, they discussed his new enemy's weapon, which was a plain sword. The mention of the blade made him look at the Sword Maiden, albeit not in the right places. She noticed him peeking and told him to speak his mind out loud. Ash wondered if he could touch her in the same way she could touch him. Not having the patience to play with him, she influenced his next words. He told Lang to tell Varkas to clean his neck and wait for him tomorrow. With this, the two prisoners parted ways, with Lang heading off to his boyfriend. It was odd, as he actually walked toward the deathmatch arena, not a couple's room. Taking his attention off it, the Sword Maiden gestured and told him to head to his room. After all, they would be busy exploring a world he had never known. Despite being offended by what she was implying, he blushed and happily ran toward her. Meanwhile, in the deathmatch arena, there was a horrific scene. Lang said Ash accepted the challenge, not because of the name, but because he wanted a sword fight. Varkas promised to pay him back sometime soon, but the bald prisoner said he could do that now by explaining his sudden interest in the boy and who Silent was. Varkas did not mind telling him, but warned him to be prepared for the weight of such knowledge. Lang continued to tear flesh from a dead arena fighter and said he would rather stay away from big shots. Munching on the meat, he said Ash looked more like an innocent boy than a cult leader. Varkas replied that anyone who stepped into the prison was far removed from the word innocent. In a dark corridor, Varkas confirmed that Ash had already accepted his deathmatch challenge. A guard reminded him to destroy the boy to the point where a two-winged healer could not save him. As long as he died tomorrow, the elf prisoner would be free from the clutches of the prison. However, he and a child he was caring for could not stay in the city, according to Silent. And Varkas said he had no interest in breathing the same air as that man either. He was pushed forward as the guard treated him like a criminal again. The elf death row inmate was scolded for clinging to arrogance and acting like a noble. Meanwhile, Ash was completely unaware of this and was discussing things with the Sword Maiden. She said there were two pieces of news, the good one being lifetime government-provided housing. The bad news was that his head might get chopped off at any time. Even someone as strong as Tiger was powerless because of the chip in his neck. Even if he escaped prison, the chip would catch him and could make him do anything it wanted. Unfortunately, he could not carve it out, as it had already fused with his very bone marrow. With that in mind, he wondered if there was any way to remove it with sorcery. Smiling eerily, she said there were plenty. The one he was most likely going to get his hands on was a certain sword magic miracle. It was a defensive skill meant to purge abnormal states and could wipe the chip from his body instantly. To cast miracles, he first needed magic spirits, and he had 4 ways to obtain those. One was to resonate with the arcane world naturally, but the chip would prevent him from doing that. 2 was trading with others, but he had nothing to offer. 3 was killing an owner and forcibly taking the spirit, but that was obviously not an option. The last and his only option was to directly hunt for a wild spirit in the arcane realm. The only way in was by triggering and tapping into a magi spirit, allowing his consciousness to slip in. In other words, he needed a spirit to enter the realm, but was going to the realm because he had no spirit. It was just like a recent graduate realizing that all entry-level jobs required 3 years of experience. Just as he was about to despair, the Sword Maiden said he did not have to use his own spirit for this method. He turned around with hope, and she reminded him that she already had the sword spirit, allowing her to enter the realm since they bonded through the manual. She could take him with her without any problem. Confused, he hurriedly checked the manual to see if such a feature actually existed. To his surprise, there really was an extra function module. He clicked on the appropriate boxes and confirmed that he was ready. Nothing happened for a while, and he noticed the Sword Maiden sitting around with a smile. He told her to hurry up and accept it already. So, she headed out to prepare while he waited even longer. The Sword Maiden mocked him, saying he just wouldn't understand what she had to prepare. With this, she disappeared and left him all alone in his room. Ash plopped down on his bed, completely spent from the exhausting day he had to go through. Meanwhile, in Stellaris, which was 3 hours behind the prison's time, was the girls' dorm. Sonia's real body was just getting back from training with Ingrid. Her day was crammed with advanced classes, sparring sessions, and sword magic training at night to master the wave sword magic. She was being personally trained by Professor T, a sword saint who might gain 4 wings soon. Sonia offered to recommend Ingrid as well, but Ingrid wanted to earn her achievements on her own. That said, Sonia would not have known to turn down Felix's challenge if it wasn't for her. The professor signed her up for the Truth University tournament and would even use their facilities. This news caught Adele's attention, and she asked to be introduced to handsome students. Calling out Lois, who had been stiffly silent all this time, Sonia said she would never forget her roommates. The constant taunting made the girl shake as she gripped her book tight. It was obvious that she was nearing her limit and was about to explode. To their surprise, Lois calmed down and regained her composure after a while. Dissatisfied with the reaction, Sonia left to head to the mediation room. Her roommates were left behind, and Adele turned to Lois with a concerned gaze. She tried to console her, saying there was no need to humor an arrogant country bumpkin. However, Lois was smart enough to acknowledge her loss this time. Sonia had already climbed to a point she had to look up to, but she refused to let this continue and bow her head after graduation. Not knowing how to handle the situation, Adele backed away with a worried expression but decided to give her friend some space. Meanwhile, Sonia arrived at the mediation hall, which was specifically meant for students exploring the arcane realm. With her identity and access verified, she was instructed to walk directly into the wall. She did as told and passed through without a problem. Inside the building, a miracle accelerated the thoughts of all those inside. The observer had actually been with her all this time. Since he was still with her late at night, he tried to charge her for overtime pay, but since she was broke, he made her pay by turning the girl into his employee. She had not graduated from the academy yet, so as an intern, she would receive no pay. That said, he had obviously put so much effort into training her with the intention of reaping more. Suddenly, taking a serious tone, he said all she needed to do was stay alive. He laughed it off as a joke and admitted that he was currently too weak to enter the arcane realm alone. As such, he needed her to accompany him forward. Sonia passed through a locked door and found herself in a serene plain under the starry night sky. Taking a seat on the grass, Sonia summoned her sword spirit and closed her eyes. This bond allowed the gates to open, and she immediately fell into the arcane world. Worried, she reached out and called to the observer, but he assured her he was right with her, claiming a sacred destiny linked them. Finding herself on a boat, she was surprised to see the observer's physical form, but he was just as surprised to see hers. The two entered the spirit realm for the first time, floating on the sea of knowledge. While Ash was delighted to be wearing his character's clothes, Sonia pointed out that this body of water was the first stop for everyone in the arcane realm. However, she had no idea why there was a boat. As their lesson stated, people arrived bare, meaning no external aids at all. She had heard that people were forced to soak in the water and swim. Ash then confidently explained that her soul was split in two, one part the boat and the other the human body. When she questioned his proof, he told her to swim away from the boat, claiming she would be unable to since she was bound. She did as told and came back a bit later, completely refuting his claim. The observer's mistake made her smirk, but his true intention became clear when she saw him staring at her soaked body. Despite his argument that it was a test, the trick earned him a punch to the head. He belittled the presence of the boat, but Sonia argued it was a huge deal, as drowning was the most common way sorcerers died. The arcane realm was the most important part of a sorcerer's growth, with many spending their lives exploring it. However, this endeavor caused many greedy souls to be devoured by the sea. Dying there required a 3-day mental recovery in the real world. The soul suffered heavy trauma, and the stronger one was, the greater the damage. New sorcerers only needed 3 days, silver ranked required at least 15, and gold ranked took months. Meanwhile, sanctuary and legendary sorcerers took years. If one could explore the realm, their growth accelerated by 90%, so there were different approaches. Some were conservative and grew steadily, while others risked everything to become top tier. Of course, losing would turn one into a permanent wreck. With this, it became immensely clear that having a boat was akin to cheating. Getting an idea, Ash wondered if the boat was related to the Sorcerer manual. Everything else was disabled, but it seemed he had the power to drive the boat. A window was even kind enough to give him a beginner tutorial. However, he was interrupted as the vehicle suddenly shook. Seeing Sonia paddling with her arms, he told her to let him handle it. She was surprised, not expecting him to actually know his way around the realm. As the observer asked for some time to read the tutorial, she sighed in disappointment, believing it was a joke. After all, even Professor T had no exploration guide for the realm. In the arcane, they were all equally ignorant and in search of knowledge. But one thing to remember was to never stay in one place too long. When people did so, their real body thought they had actually died, which caused their heart to stop. He was surprised that she was so afraid of death and expected her to recklessly chase thrills. Sonia really had been like that back when she had nothing to lose. Now, she was a prodigy who was guaranteed gold status in 20 years, possibly sanctuary in 40. Gold status would basically turn her into nobility. While sanctuary could help her shake the world, wanting to play it safe, she paddled toward the shallow white mist, known to be lucky. Just then, the boat sped forward and made a quick U-turn, completely following Ash's will. With a blank face, he shared that he was the one who brought the vehicle and had just learned that he could actually control it. Before she could argue any further, the mist sparkled as it touched her body. With clear eyes, she saw sword techniques stream into her mind. It was pure sword magic flowing into her body as they sped forward. As long as one moved in the realm, sorcerers could automatically absorb knowledge. Moreover, it could condense into silver magic power, forming the symbol of a one-winged sorcerer's strength. A feather appeared on her back, and while she soaked up the rush of knowledge and power, Ash stared at the holographic map like a clown passing notes. He looked at a screen that showed where they were, including descriptions of different parts of the realm. Some indicated nothing valuable, while others warned of danger. Fortunately, there was also a location clearly advised for them to visit. He steered the boat in that direction, and as soon as they entered the area, Sonia spotted a small island ahead, hidden in the fog. Her eyes opened in surprise, recognizing it as the place where the observer had tested her in a dream. Misunderstanding, she thought he must be doing all this on purpose, and labeled him a mysterious expert. She walked away as soon as they docked on the shore, and they noticed the fog immediately clear up. In front of them was an armed man who declared that his gun was fast beyond 7 steps, but within 7 steps it was both fast and accurate. He took aim when they entered his range, completely ignoring Ash's pleas to talk things out first. The gunpowder fired, and Ash barely dodged in time to avoid a direct hit. The bullet clipped his leg, but the damage wasn't severe. Taking a closer look, he noticed his form and color fading, realizing that being hit drained soul energy from his real body. While he was still processing what was happening, Sonia sped ahead. The man took aim, ready to fire another shot at them. As he pulled the trigger with a determined shout, the Sword Maiden summoned the Wave Sword magic spirit and swung her blade down. The slash cut the bullet and knocked the enemy off balance. Before he could recover, Ash followed up and grabbed the man's entire body to restrain his movements. With this, Sonia was free to dash forward and thrust her blade through the enemy's soul's head. The gunman disappeared in a puff of smoke, and the two sighed in relief as they won the unexpected battle. They were starting to argue, but noticed an object appearing from where the enemy had been. Although Ash was confused, Sonia instantly knew what it was. It was a legacy island in the realm, and the book was the Gun Sorcerer manual. Ash was shocked, not expecting to come across another manual so easily. His mind immediately experienced the manual's story. Various small, fast, and nimble creatures were all hit accurately by a young boy's arrow. Running home with his father after the successful hunt, he happily carried his spoils. Just then, they saw a villager's chest blasted open. In the distance was an approaching horde of monsters. Aside from their armor, one orc carried the smoking gun that had killed the villager. The boy and his father drew their bows and fired to retaliate, but their weak arrows merely bounced off the enemy's metal armor. With no way to defend against them, the monsters wreaked havoc, shooting everyone in the village and completely taking over. The father managed to carry the boy far away to safety, but as soon as he felt a semblance of safety, his knees gave out, and he fell to the ground lifeless. The boy watched his parent draw his last breath. Filled with anger and hatred, he put his father's fallen hat on and, with tears in his eyes, waited for a target. An orc gunman walked through the tall grass but quickly died as an arrow was shot through his head. The boy then took the dead monster's firearm and started to take revenge. A few unsuspecting enemies were killed at first, but even as they came to expect his presence, the foolish monsters were no match for a trained sharpshooter, even if he was using an unfamiliar weapon. He took them down one by one, dodging their attacks and forcing them to fall into the traps he laid out. At first, he completely eliminated the horde that attacked his village and soon piled the corpses of many others. Years passed and he grew older, but his mission stayed the same. At one point, he found a recruitment flyer for orc eradication units and joined their brigade. Just like that, he spent decades shooting and killing the race that took his family away. Granted a Medal of Honor, he eventually retired and sat on a rocking chair with his gun, watching over the land he fought to free. Taking a swig of his alcohol, he shot a rabid wolf. Another drink, and a human fell this time. Then another, then another. After a while, he entered his home with his smoking gun and pointed the barrel at his lover. She stared at him with deep and sad eyes, but they grew in surprise as he fell to the ground, eventually succumbing to death. Ash looked at the manual's owner, while Sonia was just surprised that he had finished the whole thing so quickly.